We're going to discuss one Indian anthropologist, VERRIER ELWIN. VERRIER ELWIN is a very unique type, very unique. People like that are quite rare. And I would say anthropology is honored by a man like him. Why is it so? Normally, let us examine how a person becomes an anthropologist. He does graduation, maybe post-graduation. After that, he goes on a field work. He studies a simple society and comes back to the university and submits his thesis, gets PhD, and if he is good enough, he may even become a theoretician, or he may simply settle as a professor in a university. So that is normally the career of an anthropologist. At least as of now, that is it. But Elwin came through a completely different route. He is like a writer. He's a writer on tribal issues. A writer on a tribal issues, but he wrote so extensively, so innovatively, and with passion and depth. He came to be regarded as an anthropologist. And in certain ways, much better than the so-called professional anthropologists. So why did he become, or how did he become what he became, is an interesting story. How essentially a kind and religious person becomes an anthropologist simply as a part of pursuing his own nature, his concern for mankind. So let us examine the profile. He came to India in 1927 to join Christ Seva Sangh in Pune. Its aim was indigenizing Christianity, which means he came on a missionary work. He came on a missionary work. Then here he saw freedom struggle and came close to Gandhi. Partly because Elwin was very sympathetic, like this. For example, he worked on parallels between Christianity and Hinduism. For example, who are the equivalents to Bhakti saints in Christianity? Bhakti saints being Kabir, Tukaram, Meera. And then he wrote on Christ and Satyagraha, putting forward a theological case for joining Gandhi. And he made one very bold statement. He said Satyagraha is more in tune with Christ than any other in the world. This is a very bold statement. He is a British man, so belongs to the class of rulers, came as a missionary, part of missionary activity. But then he saw political struggle here, and then he thought the political struggle, which was anti-colonial and anti-British, was closer to what Jesus preached. This in itself shows his unusual thinking, boldness, kindness. No wonder Gandhi, he won Gandhi's affection. And then next he goes to Gonds, goes to live with Gonds from 1932. So Christianity was one phase in life, politics, Satyagraha was another phase in life, and now he goes to Gonds. He goes to stay there, not to do field work and submit. And he felt so close. He married a Gond girl in 1940. And when there was a problem with the marriage, when that girl was in love with somebody else, he remarried another in 1949, divorcing her. So which means Elwin was completely involved in Gond life. And he refused to convert them. That created conflict of interest between the church and him. So finally, he had to leave the church. Okay. So then he goes deep into Gond way of life. And something unusual happens in him. He found that Gond way of life may have some truth which is against Gandhism, against Christianity, and against the moral code he was brought up with. In the first place, why did he like Gandhi? I think he liked Gandhi because he saw the parallels between Gandhism and Christianity. But now, after seeing Gond life, he was rejecting what he appreciated before. He rejected asceticism, Gandhi's asceticism, vegetarianism, prohibition. Okay. Which means he was not looking at Gond life from the reference point of religion. He was looking at religion, Gandhism, from the reference point of Gond culture. How many anthropologists do this? Very rare indeed. Elwin is become a critic of his culture. This is beyond cultural relativism. Cultural relativism is you don't judge others. But Elwin liked Gond culture so much that he was becoming critical of the culture in which he grew up. So that is an interesting development. And this change in his thinking is expressed in his Leaves from the Jungle, 1936. This is about him, mostly about him, thoughts about society and culture. And there he makes one important statement. The tribal has a real message for our sophisticated modern world, which is threatened with disintegration as a result of its passion for positions and its lack of love. Saying lack of love. Passion for positions, its lack of love. Okay. I think the word love Elwin may have meant something much more. It is not Jesus kind of love. It's much more. Because Elwin later took a different stand on physical love also. And the way he described sexual life shocked many people. In his writing on the Baiga, he said, it was so detailed that he said men could distinguish between 12 kinds of breasts, ranking them in precise order of attractiveness. See, this man was going into the such details of culture. And then on Muria Ghotul, he said the best of Ghotul games, Ghotul is a youth dormitory where unmarried boys and girls live together and experiment in sex. Elwin is saying the best of games there is the dance of genitals, an ecstatic swinging in the arms of the beloved. Elwin was describing sexuality, the freedom in enjoying sex, playful attitude towards sex, which is anti-Gandhi and which I would say anti-Christ. And if you doubt, Elwin makes an explicit statement. In a married couple, no one was a virgin absolutely. Only virgins to each other. Muria domestic life might well be a model and example for the whole world. Church would be offended by a statement like this. Somebody whom Gandhi liked so much, saying thing like this. So essentially he was looking at modern civilization, modern religion, ascetic ideals, Gandhism, from the viewpoint of freedom, liberty of the Gonds and others. Okay. So Elwin is being himself, sharing his feelings. And next, the way he writes is not normally the way anthropologist writes. He writes, for example, he writes in fiction mode, some in autobiographical modes. For example, Leaves is autobiographical. And Full Mat of the Hills 1937 was a novel on a tribal beauty stricken by leprosy, abandoned by her lover. So, on a fiction mode, he explores culture. Again, unusual way of writing. Elwin enjoyed literature. He would write poetry. He would describe things, write in detail, very good narrative. His descriptions are very vivid. And Essira said on Leaves, and also this novel, that Full Mat of the Hills, very vivid glimpses of Gond life. written with intimate knowledge and deep sympathy. This is the feature, intimate knowledge and deep sympathy. That is how Elwin would write. Next, he goes to what may be closer to traditional ethnography. Closer, but not exactly like the traditional. In 1939, on the Baiga, he discusses their problems, the forced transition of shifting cultivators to agriculture. So he gives their problems. Okay. And then he says that the pen is the chief weapon with which I fight for my poor. Fight for his poor, it seems. Again, this passion is missing in many anthropologists. Fighting for his poor. Then he writes The Religion of an Indian Tribe, 1955, on Sora. His sixth book on a tribe following ethnographies on the Baiga, Agaria, Maria, Moria, and the Bondo. Okay. So this is how he wrote. And he also wrote on policy. For example, he held the purpose of anthropology is this: the scholar's work must lead to administrative reforms and an improvement in the living conditions of the people, or it has failed, however technically brilliant it may be. So to him, this is the purpose of anthropology. And he wrote books specifically on policy making, a philosophy for NAFO, 1957, a New Deal for Tribal India, 1963. He also wrote them in the context of the fact that he became an advisor on tribal policy to the central government after India became independent. And he was close to the Prime Minister. So Elwin impacted Prime Minister's thinking. And his last book was Tribal World of VERRIER ELWIN, 1964, is his autobiography. Even his autobiography is called Tribal World. Okay. So essentially, he thought most important part of him is interaction with the tribal world. Okay. So this is the life he led. And now let us see how he is viewed now. How is his kind of writing viewed? Well, some people liked it, and there are also very serious critics. So in his writing, I mean, he describes everything: material culture, dress, housing, implements, food, hunting techniques. But he focuses on certain key traits rather than everything, like Gothul or Sweden cultivation. And then he thinks he called himself a devoted disciple of Malinowski. He says Malinowski is functionalism. But what kind of functionalism Elwin followed? It is not how culture satisfies individual needs. It is not in that sense, but Elwin would explain how things in culture are related, integrated, well connected. And if something is affected, how other things may be negatively affected. For example, shifting cultivation affected, and what impact does it have on other aspects of culture, and because of which it will have problems. So Elwin's functionalism is of that type. It is about interconnections, and if something changes, what happens and how certain problems may crop up. So this is the kind of work he did, and let us look at how others evaluate it. Mostly people praised, people accepted his contribution as a positive thing and an important thing, but they disagree in terms of whether that is a better way of expressing himself. Okay, for example, Dumont said on Elwin's book on Sora, this was good reading but bad science. Good reading means interesting, exciting, but bad science, not accurate, not sufficiently analytical. So this is an issue. Others have criticized Elwin for not having grounding in theory and leaving out certain details which may be helpful in theory construction or systematic analysis. So basically, people who critiqued Elwin thought it was more like good journalism, interesting, but not sufficiently rigorous, not sufficiently theoretical. So that was how Elwin was taken by his critics. You can take M.N. Srinivas as one of his critics. M.N. Srinivas called him an amateur anthropologist. He says, Elwin wrote so well, he made anthropology popular among the general public. This popularity was partly due to the focusing of attention on marriage, sex, and art, and to the neglect of subject of serious professional concerns such as kinship, economics, law, and politics. And with an increasing professionalization, Elwin would rank as, see look, one of the last and most distinguished amateur anthropologists. So M.N. Srinivas, Elwin is an amateur anthropologist, not professional, not rigorous enough, not scientific enough. But many disagreed with this kind of evaluation. For example, S.C. Dubé said, by his own individual efforts, Elwin has produced more and better research work than many of the extensively staffed and large research organizations in the country. Many of the extensively staffed and large research. So Elwin has produced very good research. It's not just interesting stuff. That's S.C. Dubé's comment. It's a compliment. And Hemendorf says it so clearly. Elwin contributed more to our understanding of India's aboriginal populations than any other scholar. Not any other scholar, living or dead. And his monographs on such tribes as Baiga, Moria, Gonds, Bondos, and Sora will be valued as documents of a vanished pattern of life when many theoretical works of professional anthropologists will be long forgotten. Hemendorf is very, very sure that Elwin's contribution is the best. Okay. Let us discuss, we discussed the writing style, but let us discuss the kind of field work Elwin did. Elwin's field work methods are also different. Elwin, first of all, believed in field work. There is no substitute for field work. There is no substitute for life in the village among people, staying in village houses and enduring the physical distress as well as the possible misunderstanding that may arise. So Elwin, it is an understatement to say Elwin did field work because to Elwin it is life. For me, anthropology did not mean field work. It meant my whole life. My method was to settle down among the people, live with them, share their life as far as an outsider could, and generally do several books together. This meant that I did not depend merely on asking questions, but knowledge of the people gradually sank in till it was part of me. His method was to make several visits over many years, visits lasting weeks. And in some cases, he depended on translators. So basically, he wrote on where he was staying and where he knew the language. That was one kind of writing. Sometimes he went out, spent for weeks on, and like that for years, interacting, sometimes with translators, without translators. But finally, having a feeling of the culture, not simply with a set of questionnaires and interviews. I think Elwin is more interested in probing, feeling, thinking like native, and trying to share that feeling with others. Not much bothered about what is the recent theory in anthropology and to which school he belonged, and the theoretical adequacy of his books. So Elwin is a different kind of man altogether. M.N. Srinivas said something about fieldwork. He said that an anthropologist should have 3 births. How? Anthropologists will have second birth when he understands, feels the other. So Elwin, applying it to Elwin definitely had this second birth. But M.S. Srinivas says that anthropology should have third birth back in the university. That is coming out of that tribal mindset. According to M.N. Srinivas, in the analogy, going by the analogy, Elwin did not have the third birth. Elwin went to understand a tribe and he remained there. He did not go to any university because in the first place he did not go from the university. Okay. So M.N. Srinivas thinks that Elwin, going by M.N. Srinivas' criteria, Elwin did not have third birth. But we need to ask, should an anthropologist have third birth? Or how can you define third birth as writing in a university or coming back to your own culture? Elwin had second birth and trying to translate, interpret the meaning of the tribal culture to the outsider. So he is an interpreter, translator across cultures. Normally an anthropologist goes to study and comes back to his own. M.N. Srinivas thinks coming back to his own is the finality, but why? So Elwin should not be evaluated on the scheme M.N. Srinivas proposed. In fact, others have to be evaluated on the basis of life Elwin led.